All right, welcome to another edition of SVG Sports Tech On Demand. I'm Jason Dackman, Chief Editor at SVG, and I am joined today by Steven McKenna of Studio Network Solutions, that's SNS, and he's the Director of Sales. Steven, thanks for taking the time today. How are you?
Oh, thank you. Thanks for having me. Really good. Everything's been going great. How about you?
Really good, yeah, hanging in as good as they can be in these days, but looking up. So SNS is really known for the EVO shared storage solution. Obviously, you guys have lots of products under that umbrella, but that's really what it comes down to for you guys. And it's a popular solution among sports production outfits. So I'm curious, especially now with the world the way it is and a lot more remote production, multi-site production, that type of thing because of the pandemic. What are some of the problems that you guys are solving for creative teams, especially in the sports world?
Well, it's interesting, actually. So there's a lot of problems to be solved, and certainly the remote threw a fun new wrinkle for us last year. But going forward here, we got the baseball season open. Fans are in stands. It's a welcome change going on. But as far as the problems, really what has to happen is the ability to now search media, find media becomes even more important, that asset management piece, right? It was one thing to have a bunch of drives on a shelf when I was going to the office and somebody kind of knew where they were. It was a totally different thing to say, okay, now you have to run into the office and know where my drive is to try to figure out that footage. So what the EVO does is provides not only a centralized piece of storage, but also the asset management tools to keep that stuff organized so anyone on the team can find it at any time. We did release our Nomad remote production application last year to be able to quickly get proxies off for edit and things like that so that people can be editing at home against a local device as opposed to trying to stream high-res content over the internet. And we also make sure that we can use our automation engine to move files to initiate a file move remotely rather than have to drag something through a workstation so that I can still leverage my network and facility while I'm not necessarily there.
Sure. Yeah. And I think one of the interesting things about you guys too is you can kind of serve all parties when it comes to sports. If you're a smaller, maybe alternative sports organization that just has a bunch of external hard drives and needs to figure out how to be a little bit more holistic, you can help there. Or if you're more of a mainstream, larger sports media organization, you guys can help there. So can you talk a little bit about how you serve both sides of the spectrum there?
Yeah, a lot of the challenges are universal to sports, and one of the biggest ones really is metadata. When we work in a post-production environment, I'm not that interested in necessarily how many cups of coffee the lead actor had before they went on the set that day. But when I'm dealing with an athlete, I really care about how many hits they got last week or last year. So being able to maintain that stuff, and those problems are universal. Doesn't matter what sport. So whether we're dealing with Major League Baseball teams, football, rest of world football, as well as American football, all the way down to surfing competitions, esports, drone racing is a thing.
Big.
So. It's really neat if you haven't seen it. Some of the on-thing cameras are really cool. But I mean, all the way out to NASCAR and other stuff, which you still need to be able to capture all this data. You need to keep it. You need to be able to use it, find it, and look for those specific plays, races, highlights, whatever. And our tool set really does provide that not only for the major teams with huge budgets and D1 college, but all the way down the line. We have high school sports teams, and our software is free in unlimited fashion. So we're really big on democratizing that workflow idea that just because you don't have the budget to do everything, that Major League Baseball does, doesn't mean you can't also put on a really impressive and professional looking production for your fans.
Right. Yeah. And the operations have changed as we kind of talked about at the top. Remote is everywhere right now with people having to work from home. So how have you seen your customers make that transition from on-premise to remote, or probably the more popular option, more of a hybrid on-prem and remote?
Well, really all remote is still going to be a hybrid because of the high resolution of the media, getting a melt together. We're not really streaming that stuff over the internet per se. There are a lot of different ways to do it. How I'm seeing it happen was definitely in phases. So first it was, just go get the drives, bring them home. And then Then when you run out of footage at home from the drive you grab, people started to look for a more permanent solution to maybe there's a more of a hybrid kind of workflow going forward too, where I can work at home some days and work in the office some days. So we've seen a lot of our clients have adopted the Nomad workflow very quickly. It's a very seamless workflow. It's a very traditional kind of offline, online workflow, just doing it over the wider area network. And we even released our own VPN service to better accommodate connectivity between our on-prem device and our remote user, so that you don't have to go buy a second device to have someone at home, which all that's really doing is increasing cost per user that you're trying to retain as an employee here during this pandemic. So we don't want to add cost to the gear and things like that. Well, sports revenue certainly plummeted. Which really created a very unique challenge for a lot of clients, which was, okay, my revenue is nothing and I have to do more stuff and hire more people to get these things back and forth. So it was the absolute worst possible scenario. I have less cash coming in and you want me to spend more in order to keep doing the thing we did yesterday. Yep. But with SNS and for our clients with Nomad, there was no additional cost. There was, here's a piece of software, here you go, get to work. And it was incredibly well received and continues to be. So something we're very excited about.
Very cool. I'm sure we're going to see more on the Nomad front and on a variety of fronts coming down the line. But that's for the next edition of Sports Tech On Demand with SNS. For now, really appreciate you taking the time, Steven, and stay safe out there. All right.
You too. Thank you guys so much. And as always, it's a pleasure talking to you.